When we think about being good with money, our minds usually jump to spreadsheets, complex formulas, and stock charts. But what if I told you the real secret to financial success has almost nothing to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you behave? Today, we're diving into the brilliant ideas from Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, to see why our behavior, well, it just matters so much more than our brains.
And it all kicks off with this incredible, real-life story. It's a financial paradox, really, a tale of two men, a janitor and a top finance executive, whose lives went in such wildly different directions that it forces you to question pretty much everything you thought you knew about building wealth.
Okay, so on one side we have Ronald Reed. He was a janitor, a gas station attendant, a totally normal guy. And on the other side, Richard Fiscone. He was a Harvard-educated, high-flying finance executive. Now, if you had to bet who would end up richer, it's a no-brainer, right? But the actual outcomes, well, they were the complete opposite of what anyone could have predicted.
Get this, $8 million. That is the fortune that Ronald Reed, the janitor, quietly built up over his lifetime. When he passed away, he left his friends and his entire community just completely floored. Nobody had a clue. So what was his secret? Some crazy stock tip? A lottery win? Nope. His strategy was almost shockingly simple. He just saved whatever little he could. He put that money into stable, well-known companies, blue chip stocks. And then he did the hardest thing of all. He just waited. For decades, he let the quiet magic of compounding do its thing. Meanwhile, Richard Fiscone, the guy with the fancy degree, took the exact opposite path. He used a ton of debt to live this incredibly lavish lifestyle. We're talking a mansion with 11 bathrooms that cost him $90,000 a month just to maintain. So when the 2008 financial crisis hit, his whole high-risk world just collapsed. He ended up bankrupt. And this brings us to the big, mind-bending question. How is this even possible? I mean, think about it. In what other field can a total amateur with zero training just demolish a highly educated expert? You'd never expect a janitor to perform better heart surgery than a surgeon, right? So what on earth makes money so different?
Well, the answer is right there in the book's core idea. It's not about what you know. It's all about how you act. It's behavior over brains, plain and simple.
It turns out that managing money is actually a soft skill. Ronald Reed was patient. Richard Fiscone was greedy. That simple difference in their behavior was way more powerful than any gap in their education. How you handle your own fear, your own ego, that's so much more important than anything you can learn from a textbook.
You see, we're all taught to approach money like it's physics, a hard science with fixed rules and laws. You plug in the numbers, you get a predictable answer. But money doesn't work like that at all. It works like psychology. It's messy, it's emotional, it's full of nuance. Our biggest financial choices aren't made on a spreadsheet. They're made around the dinner table, and that changes everything.
Okay, so if behavior is the key, that leads to the next question, right? Why are we all so different with our money? Why do some of us save obsessively while others spend like there's no tomorrow? What's going on there?
And this brings us to another really profound insight from the book. No one is crazy. The money decisions that look completely bonkers to you probably make perfect sense to somebody else, and that's because their entire worldview was built on a completely different set of life experiences.
This quote from Housel just hits so hard. Think about it. Your personal experience with money is this tiny, minuscule fraction of everything that has ever happened in the global economy. And yet, for most of us, that sliver of experience makes up about 80% of how we think the entire financial world works.
Let me give you a perfect example. Look at this chart. If you were born in, say, 1950, you would have watched the stock market basically go nowhere during your teens and 20s. The lesson you learned? Stocks are a pointless gamble. But if you are born just 20 years later, in 1970, you saw the market go up nearly tenfold. Your lesson? Stocks are the greatest wealth-building machine on the planet. It's the same market, but two completely different realities.
And the same thing goes for something like inflation. If you grew up in the 1960s, you literally watched prices triple. You felt that anxiety of your money buying less and less. But if you were born in the 1990s, inflation was so low you probably never even thought about it. Our personal history totally dictates what we see as normal and what we see as dangerous.
So our personal histories are a huge part of the puzzle. But there's another piece we have to talk about, one that we often try to ignore: the powerful, invisible forces of luck, and its twin, risk.
Let's talk about Bill Gates for a second.
His success story involves an incredible dose of luck. He just happened to go to one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer back in 1968. But then there's his equally brilliant classmate, Kent Evans. They were best friends, planning to start a company together, but Kent was tragically killed in a mountaineering accident before he even graduated. He was a victim of risk, the other side of the same coin.
Just think about the odds here. The odds of a teenager in 1968 attending a school like Lakeside? About 1 in a million. The odds of a high schooler dying in a mountaineering accident? Also about 1 in a million. Luck and risk are siblings. They're a constant reminder that not every outcome in life is a direct result of our own individual effort.
When we look back at people who succeed, we tend to call their risky moves bold. We hear a quote from someone like the railroad tycoon Cornelius Vanderbilt, who basically said he was above the law, and we might think, wow, what a genius, that's what it takes.
But you have to ask the question that the legendary investor Benjamin Graham posed. Can we really tell the difference between a lucky break and a brilliant decision? The line between bold and reckless is razor thin, and honestly, you can usually only see it in hindsight. Vanderbilt could have just as easily ended up in prison, and his story would be a warning, not an inspiration.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Our behavior, our unique histories, the roles of luck and risk. So what does this all mean for you? How can you actually use this stuff to make better decisions with your own money?
Well, it really boils down to 3 big ideas. First, just be humble. Recognize that not all success comes from hard work, and not all failure comes from laziness. Luck and risk are always at play. Second, look for broad patterns, not extreme examples. Don't try to be the next Elon Musk. His story is so full of extreme luck, it's impossible to copy. Instead, learn from the general, repeatable habits of many successful people. And finally, know yourself. Really try to understand the biases and beliefs that your own, very specific personal history has given you.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. All of our financial decisions, every dollar we save, spend, or invest, they all come together to tell a story. A story about what we value, what we fear, and who we are. So take a second and ask yourself, what story is your money telling?